Dead Bart, author KI Simpson. You know how Fox has a weird way of counting Simpsons episodes? They refuse to count a couple of them, making the amount of episodes inconsistent. The reason for this is a lost episode from season 1. Finding details about this missing episode is difficult. No one who was working on the show at the time likes to talk about it. From what has been pieced together, the episode's production number was 7G06, and the title was Dead Bart. The episode labeled 7G06, Moaning Lisa, was made later, and given Dead Bart's production code to hide the latter's existence. It also was written entirely by Matt Groening. During production of the first season, Matt started to act strangely. He was very quiet and seemed nervous and morbid. Mentioning this to anyone who was present around Matt at the time resulted in them getting very angry and forbidding you to ever mention it to Matt himself. I first heard of it at an event where David Silverman was speaking. Someone in the crowd asked about the episode, and Silverman simply left the stage, ending the presentation hours early, in addition to getting angry. Asking anyone who was on the show about Dead Bart would cause them to do everything they could to stop you from directly communicating with Matt Groening. At a fan event, I managed to follow him after he spoke to the crowd, and eventually had a chance to talk to him alone as he was leaving the building. He didn't seem upset that I had followed him. He probably expected a typical encounter with an obsessive fan. When I mentioned the lost episode, though, all color drained from his face, and he started trembling. When I asked him if he could tell me any details, he sounded like he was on the verge of tears. He grabbed a piece of paper, wrote something on it, and handed it to me. He begged me never to mention the episode again. The piece of paper had a website address on it. I would rather not say what it was for reasons you'll see in a second. I entered the address into my browser and came to a site that was completely black, except for a line of yellow text, a link. I clicked on it, and a file started downloading. Once the download was complete, my computer went crazy. It was the worst virus I had ever seen. System Restore didn't work. The entire computer had to be rebooted. Before doing this, though, I copied the file onto a CD. I tried to open it on my now empty computer. As I suspected, there was an episode of The Simpsons on it. The episode started off like any other, but had very poor quality animation. If you've seen the original animation for Some Enchanted Evening, it was similar but less stable. The first act was fairly normal, but the way the characters acted was a little off. Homer was angrier, Marge seemed depressed, Lisa behaved anxiously, and Bart appeared to have genuine anger and hatred towards his parents. The episode was about the Simpsons going on a plane trip. Near the end of the first act, the plane was taking off. Bart was fooling around, as you'd expect. However, as the plane was about 50 feet off the ground, Bart broke a window and was sucked out. At the beginning of the series, Matt had an idea that the animated style of the Simpsons world represented life, and that death made things more realistic, hence why it was used in this episode. The picture of Bart's corpse was barely recognizable. They took full advantage of it not having to move and made an almost photorealistic drawing of his dead body. Act 1 ended with the shot of Bart's corpse. When Act 2 started, Homer, Marge, and Lisa were sitting at a table crying. The crying went on and on. It became more pained and realistic, better acting than you would think possible. The animation started to decay even more as they cried, and you could hear murmuring in the background. The characters could barely be made out. They were stretching and blurring, looking like deformed shadows with random, bright colors thrown on them. There were faces in the window, flashing in and out so that you were never sure what they looked like. This crying went on for all of Act 2. Act 3 opened with a title card saying 1 year had passed. Homer, Marge and Lisa were skeletally thin and still sitting at the table. There was no sign of Maggie or the pets. They decided to visit Bart's grave. Springfield was completely deserted, and as they walked to the cemetery, the houses became more and more decrepit. They all looked abandoned. When they got to the grave, Bart's body was lying in front of his tombstone, looking just like it did at the end of Act 1. The family started crying again. Eventually they stopped and just stared at Bart's body. The camera zoomed in on Homer's face. According to summaries, Homer tells a joke at this part, but it isn't audible in the version I saw, so you can't tell what he's saying. The view zoomed out as the episode came to a close. The tombstones in the background had the names of every Simpsons guest star on them, some that no one had heard of in 1989, some that haven't been on the show yet. All of them had death dates as well. For guests who died since, like Michael Jackson and George Harrison, the dates were when they would die. The credits were completely silent and seemed handwritten. The final image was the Simpson family on their couch, like in the intros, but all drawn in the hyper-realistic, lifeless style of Bart's corpse. A thought occurred to me after seeing the episode for the first time. You could try to use the tombstones to predict the death of living Simpsons guest stars. But there was something odd about most of the ones who haven't died yet. All of their deaths are listed as the same date. Update, well, I had to get rid of that computer. I watched the episode on, even after a complete reformatting. It never worked correctly. I couldn't delete the episode file, and it kept opening on its own. I wiped the hard drive clean several times. It wouldn't go away. The sound control didn't work either. It was a laptop, but the power never seemed to run out, and I couldn't get it to turn off. I was going to keep the computer, just so I'd have a copy of the lost episode, but looking at it was making me nervous. I had a recurring nightmare several nights in a row. The episode was playing, but instead of the photorealistic Bart corpse, it was myself at 10 years old. I found a picture of myself at 10, and the nightmare was closer to it than my own memory had been. I swear. That picture of myself at 10, dead, started flashing on the computer screen so quickly that I could never be sure. After that, I destroyed the computer. I haven't been able to get the episode out of my head, though, and decided to do more research to try to understand it. I found a few people online who seemed to know about it. Apparently it aired once in a suburb of Portland, Oregon. I have a cousin who lives around there and was watching The Simpsons during the first season, so I asked him if he remembered the episode. He asked me how I knew about it. It was a nightmare he had that he had only told his parents about, and I was just a few years old at the time. I told him about the episode I saw and the people online who remembered it. He thought I was playing a prank on him, and when I got him to look at the online posts about it, he screamed and hung up. He hasn't responded to any attempts I made to contact him since, determined to get to the bottom of this. I kept searching online. I found someone who said they had a tape of it they would sell to me. I was nervous, but determined to find out the truth about this and end the matter. I bought the tape, as well as a really old and cheap TV VCR, since I had a feeling neither would be the same after I watched the episode. The episode was pretty much the same as the file I downloaded. I don't want to say anymore. This wasn't worth it, and I'd give anything to go back to how I felt when I had the computer with the file scaring me. I destroyed the tape, but it didn't help. The commercials on it, I don't want to remember them. There were monsters from my dreams I had never told anyone about. News promos about tragedies that hadn't happened yet. Surreal computer-generated animation that wouldn't have been possible in the 80s, or now for that matter. A former friend watched it with me, but he saw completely different things, with one exception. There was a seemingly live news report from June 6th, 2013. In complete monotone, he recited the details of millions of people dying in their sleep, some of them waking up for a few seconds first, rambling incoherently about something that people could only piece together had something to do with nightmares. I'm sure you can figure out what date was on the tombstones of the currently alive celebrities at the end of the episode. There was one other difference too. The joke Homer told was completely clear in this version. When it zooms in on Homer's face, while looking at Bart, he says, "If only we all were that lucky." If you like the story, please leave a subscription. Comment what video you would like to see next and share the video. It means a lot to me. We'll hear from each other soon.